question for the audience. In terms of all this happening, I want to see a show of hands. How many people in this room right now are Amazon Prime members? I was talking to my son who lives admittedly in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, so it's high density. He had a cold. He'd run out of Kleenex. And going to Halsey's point, he had, well, I'm talking to him on the phone. He says, I have Amazon now. And so he ordered Kleenex and a hot fudge sundae. You cannot make this stuff up. And it was delivered to him while he was still on the phone. And I said, do I have Amazon now? He says, no, you live in Melbourne. You'll probably never have it, but it's all high density. But it really kind of brought it home to me that you can order an ice cream sundae from Amazon and have it delivered in 30 minutes. It was scary.
Recently, I said we just moved into a new home in Chicago, and toward the end of the project, I was very involved in it, and I came to the house one day about a month before it was done, and there's a huge box on the front porch. And I didn't remember ordering anything, so I go look at the box, and it was from Amazon, but it was my address, but the company name on it was the security integrator who was doing the security system installation in the house. And for those who have been around Annixter or know Annixter, the other half of our business is what we refer to as our NSS division, Network Security Solutions. Annixter is the largest distributor of security products in the world, and security integrators are a core customer group. And so I'm thinking, well, this is interesting. So when the guy showed up, I was there. He opened the box. The componentry was in the box. The cameras were in the box. And, you know, here he had subverted, now, albeit a residential installation, which is a little bit different than commercial or heavy commercial, even industrial applications. But here were all of his components, and Amazon had subverted the channel. And I think in componentry, that's really easy to do. But if you step back from it and you say, well, what percentage of our sales as distributors are influenced by some type of a value add? Because in our business, that's a key metric. And every year we want to see that grow by 10 to 15%. Because I look at it and say, if today it's less than 10%, and I won't give the exact number, but if today it's less than 10%, then 90% of our business is at risk.
Because it could just be a component.
It's product in a box. Now, not so much heavy wire and cable, which is our legacy business. That's a much more difficult business logistically, and probably not what Amazon is looking for in terms of gross profit density and all that sort of stuff. But on the component side, it is. And so whatever the percentage is that's influenced by value-added services of some sort, product enhancement, a delivery mechanism that makes it more efficient, some of the things that Halsey touched upon, I look at that business as off the table for some of these web-based external competitors. And so, you know, our mission, and I think those who are progressive in the room, the mission is driving that percentage up as fast as you can every single year to take that business out of play and leave it in the traditional competitive space where we're all used to figuring out how to fight that out.
But it goes to the consumerization of everything, and this whole idea of wholesale versus retail, B2B and B2C, it goes away, and it's all the buyer's experience that he wants, and so you can try to protect it, and we think we do, but it's also, to your point, if you can't get that up and you can't figure out, am I giving the consumer buying experience that the user wants, and that'll differ, because when they're buying industrial wire and cable, they're going to have a different, they're going to have an expectation, but it's probably different than what they expect today.
Sure. I agree.
Well, it seems to me that one of the takeaways just from this conversation is that if I'm on the board of an electrical distributor, and I'd be asking the executive management what part of your business is at risk, and when they give me the crazy look, I would say, what is the part that I make sticky because I wrap some services around it, and I would want to know as a board member, what is that percentage, how do they measure it, and I would expect to see it drop. So the folks that are listening to this, maybe, and this isn't California, so we don't need to all share at our tables what those percentages are. But most of us, I will ask one question: how many people actually measure the business at risk, sort of the component piece versus the piece that you have value added? And I don't want you to share numbers or anything, but how many people actually have that as a metric or a key performance indicator? Raise your hand high. You should be proud. There's only what would you guys call that, 3%? less, well, you know,
You're not good at math.
well, no, no, I actually started off to be an engineer,
Oh, okay.
and I got to thermodynamics, and I couldn't do entropy. And I went to the guidance counselor and said, what's the quickest way out of this place? And they said, business, and then the rest is history.
I don't even know what
I have figured out entropy since
I don't
then.
even know what that means.
Yeah, you don't really care. It's not worth it. I'm going to open this up to the audience. We've got a lot of other questions to talk, but I want to give people an opportunity. But since we're recording this, John is going to give you a microphone. And by the way, you remember how I asked you guys a question? We all looked at each other for a while. The audience is probably going to do the same thing. So who's got a question? Oh, by the way, I have one caveat here. And the caveat I have is I've asked these individuals to be up here as industry insiders that have different perspectives and a fair amount of scar tissue. And they're not up here as representatives about their companies. So if you have any particular whining thing about they just kicked your butt on an order or something, I look at that as a personal problem, and you don't need to share it. And
We talk about that at the bar.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, but if you want to whine, you're buying. So with that caveat, everything else is fair game. So who's got a question? It's probably going to take 15 seconds.
There's one.
Oh, there's what? Oh, that was quick. Okay.
You mentioned that has a lot to do with age to cause change in the industry. Have you thought about, or what's your perspective of introducing different industries to come in here to provide their perspective? As it looks like this, like a retail type of experiences and so forth, instead of like just what you were kind of, it sounded like age was more of the influence. Have you guys thought about what other industries might be helpful to attract into this?
We, from a strategic planning standpoint, really look at the retail industry and as leading a bit and trying to understand people who have kind of gone through what we think we'll go through and get ideas from that. And so just as our company, we think that's an important thing to look at. And you always are, I think, looking best practice as another industry, but the retail industry for sure, because you get knowledge of people who have been there, done that. And so now it's just, here's what's going to happen in your world. So I think that's a great point.
One of the things that, it's actually a part of Rexels at this point, but how many people here remember Branch Electric in the Mid-Atlantic? And Chuck Steiner really focused with a very strong retail focus on these small branches and had a different business model. He was very successful. And one of the things he did, going right to what Bill's saying, he had advisors, I don't know if they're on the board or whatever, but people that were senior retailers and merchandising, and he paid a lot of attention to that.
Yeah.
So this getting the different perspectives, a lot of times you either bring somebody in to talk or you put somebody like that on your board that can sit there and say, you know, you're acting like a dork, you guys need to be thinking about this.
We did a little work in the hotel space, and with an eye towards what's the service delivery model. And so I was actually in France last week, and checking in and out of a hotel in Europe, especially a small hotel, can be quite a lengthy process. And of course, everybody shows up to check out at the same time and check in at the same time, whereas some of the hotels have done a brilliant job with their customer service delivery model. And what they've done is they've equipped their agents, their associates, with information and data and tools that allows them to be more effective, so that you could walk into a hotel and they might call your name, or they may have already checked you in. And what that does we talked about talent and the need for great talent, but what it does is, with a great service delivery model, it allows your average employee to look like a superstar, and your superstar employee to be completely off the charts. And so some of the industries that have to deal with a lot of transactions like that, especially a lot of customer-facing transactions, are also places to look. We were joking about it during this exercise. You know, if we could only get, you know, the lost luggage people at the airport, right? Who's more happy than somebody who just lost their luggage? And those people deal with it all the time.
Yeah.
I think there are a bunch of things that you can do. I mean, I think and age perhaps is a proxy for tenure or vice versa. And I think that the challenge that our industry is facing is one of tenure, which, you know, again, perhaps equates to age over time, because, you know, inevitably you do become insulated from innovation. But I think boards of advisors are a great idea. I mean, we're all representatives up here of large companies that have formal boards, so you get a lot of input from them with the additional teeth of them being able to fire you if you don't execute. So there's a little extra pressure, but a lot of small companies have found really great methods of creating boards of advisors. There are organizations, I participated, I don't as actively anymore, but in an organization named Vistage, which is a terrific networking organization where you align with peer members, and they do a very good job of putting you together with people who are in and around similar businesses and are confronting similar challenges, similar company sizes. There's an investment, but certainly if you're in a leadership role in a business, it's worth the investment. And so I don't know there's a magic answer to it, but between diversity and people you hire plus trying to find a way to get that external experience is really the secret. And if you put any effort into it, you're going to be better off than the guy who doesn't.
And by the way, I'd like to also underscore this concept of Vistage. I'm a major fan of Vistage. And when we work with distributors, especially lifestyle or small privately held distributors, we really, and the idea of setting up a board scares them to death because they don't understand it. We'll get them to join Vistage because fundamentally what happens is that you're accountable, you're embarrassed. Because when you own the company, it's like it's good to be king, kiss my ring, don't get my finger wet. And when you go to a Vistage group, people just come straight at you. I mean, and they can't fire you, but they're asking you questions that you really need to be thinking about, and you may know the answer and you just don't like the answer, like it's time to get rid of my brother-in-law. And well, but I mean, that slows everybody up. Yeah. But I mean, the Vistage thing, in terms of the external idea, in terms of other sources, there's another organization I'll recommend, and it's called SCORE. And it's what happens with, well, there's a lot of guys like me that you get old. You know, the kids throw you out of the business. You're sitting around, you do the honey-do list for a while. You know a lot of stuff. You get bored. Our buddy Charlie that we were talking about was one. And what SCORE is, it's a volunteer organization. And so with all the baby boomers getting old, that organization expanding dramatically, and think of it as free consulting, where you can get somebody that maybe was a retailer and ran a chain and built it up, and just to get somebody to come in and talk to you. But it all sounds really great in a seminar like this or a workshop, but what happens, those discussions are very challenging to you personally, and a lot of people, they get comfortable and they don't like to be challenged. So, another question? There, we got one in the back.
Hi, Adam Rochford with Rexels. Thank you so much for the info so far, but I just wanted to kind of drill down a little bit. We've been talking a lot about the kind of changeover to the new workforce and adapting to that. With that in mind, what do you find is more valuable in your sales process, in your business process? Is it the process or the content with which you're working with? That's kind of what I'm interested in, and talking about adapting to maybe less of a person-to-person relationship and more of a value add for the business. What's more important there, that process or the content that your employees are working with?
Yes, I'll speak about our experience just because at the moment, as I mentioned earlier, we have an interesting contrast because we have a legacy business that had a very well-established process around value selling and really measuring how value is being delivered, and the compensation structure was designed to encourage longer-term thinking, not just what orders am I going to get this week or next week, but how do we execute on projects that will deliver $15, $20, $30 million of revenue in one project. And now we are very involved in a business that's very transactional, and the compensation structure, which I think is more similar with the typical compensation structure in the industry, and probably for those in the room, the downside, there are upsides with it, but the downside is that it reinforces very transactional behavior. And so as we're talking about that and thinking through how we find a mix that works for a long-term strategy, what we try to do is to say, what are the three big pillars of our strategy? And those are high-level objectives that we talk about at Investor Day presentations and things. But then how do you measure that at the customer level? How do you measure whether what your salespeople are doing is indicative and is advancing those strategies? And it's amazing how quickly you can begin to measure that. And I'll go back to the simple measurement of what percentage of that person's sales to a customer are influenced by some aspect of value that the company delivers beyond product. But I think there are a lot of other ways to do it. Certainly there are margin proxies to look at whether value is being sold into that particular account. So, I guess in my view, very simply, it's about making sure that the compensation programs reinforce a process which ensures that hooks are being put into that customer relationship. And if the salespeople aren't doing that, you put them through the appropriate performance steps to get there, or conclude that they can't, and then don't be short-sighted about making those changes when that happens.